Hi everyone, good to see you. I'm Aaron Henney. I'm the artistic director of Theater Dybbuk. And I just thought that at this time where so many of us are isolated on our own, that it was a good opportunity to really connect around artistic process, how we work, and to also give you an opportunity to ask questions and learn a little more and think about your own artistic processes. Before we carry on, I'll say a few things. First time Theater Dybbuk is doing this. It's a bit of an experiment. You might see me looking to the side, checking out comments and questions, which I really encourage. Also, if I miss any that are coming in, I'm going to try and respond to them. I'll look over at Julie Lockhart, our marketing director, or she might call out to me to pay attention to them. Julie, say hi.
Hi, how's it going?
There you go. And so looking forward to this time with you. 15, 20 minutes. If a lot of questions come in, we'll go a little longer. So first, I just want to tell you a little bit about Theater Dybbuk. I founded the organization in 2011, and what we do is we create large theatrical works based on Jewish history and ritual that we create over time from 6 months to 2 years using an ensemble development process. And before I dive into talking about that process in detail, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I came to that process and this unique combination of things. So I'm a longtime playwright and playwriting teacher, and before I started Theater Dybbuk, I was working largely in Los Angeles, but also a bit around the country, creating new works, having them produced, like a lot of playwrights. And what I discovered a little over a decade ago was that the plays I was writing were not really appropriate for just sending to groups and hoping they produced them. That I was really creating work that was highly multidisciplinary and required a kind of voice on all aspects of the process. And so a little over a decade ago, I started transitioning to writing and directing and collaborating with a variety of organizations, LA Contemporary Dance Company. I was involved with Son Assembly Ensemble. I did some work at the Odyssey Theater as a playwright, and also worked with a group up in the Bay Area who I really enjoyed working with named Central Works. And in working especially at some of those companies, I learned a lot about development processes and working with multiple artists to create something together as opposed to writing a play and submitting it. And before I dive in, so that's a little about me. I was also teaching playwriting. As I said, I was working at the Roby Theater Company. I was co-literary manager at the theater at Boston Court. I did a little bit of work for Center Theater Group here in Los Angeles as a dramaturg. And so I was also thinking about the way that plays are created and the way we think about story. And so that led me to considering how a group creates work in a variety of ways. And for those who are theater makers on here, I just want to give a differentiation. There is often what we call devised work, which is often means, not always, it can mean a variety of things, but often means a group creating together and improvising and trying things out. And the work is often a result, a curated result of that group creation. As of where the work we do, I would say, is group development, meaning we are not engaging in an improvisational group-created activity in that way. Instead, what we're doing is responding to text and thinking about it together, and the group is almost functioning as a script consultancy. They are helping me as the playwright to understand the play that is developing. And so that just gives you a little bit of context for how we work. So now I'll just dive into a little bit of Theater Dybbuk's particular process and take on this. And by the way, hello to those who have just joined. I'm Artistic Director Aaron Henney. Just saying that again to say hello. Welcome. So what we do is we actually have a multi-pronged process. It's pretty exciting, and again, I want to give a shout out to my friends in the Bay Area, Central Works, because I would say aspects of our process were really influenced by my time of the 2 projects I did with them, and I want to thank them for their really great work in this field. So what happens is we begin with an idea around a show, and that idea is often born of either a passion of mine connected to Jewish history and ritual, or a concept that somebody has brought to me. And I'll give you examples of both. So in 2016, starting in 2015, we were in development. We created a show called Exegog. Exegog was based on the first recorded Jewish play. It's a work that was created likely the 2nd century before the Common Era, and we have it only in fragments. And what happened was I got really interested in Hellenistic Judaism, a period of time where Jews were relatively integrated in some parts of the world and not in others, and I thought it served as a nice analogy for our current world. And I wanted to look for things that spoke to that moment so that they could also speak to our moment in time. And I started frankly Googling and discovered we had one text that was a dramatic text still existing from that time period. So that is an example of something that grew out of my own passions. As of where our 2019 show, Hell Prepared, my good colleague and friend Arit Jaffe-Berg was working on a translation with Michela Andreatta of a text from the 17th century that was a Jewish descent into hell, a translation of the Jewish descent into hell, and they brought it to me and said, would you be interested in dramatizing this in some manner? So that's a good example of somebody coming to me, understanding the passions, and figuring out how to go from there. Now, before I dive into how we then take that text and move into it, into group development, I want to also say, who is the we? I keep saying we. The we is myself, writer, director, usually involves dramaturg and script consultant, choreographer, performers on the show, production designer, sometimes sound designer, composer, as well as scholars. We gather together. And here's what we do. I bring in a document to a first meeting that is anywhere from 3 to 5 pages that tells about the basic concept of the show, its background, as well as some history that might help us put it in context. And we have a first script meeting, and we read that, and we discuss it, and we learn from each other. We hear each other's perspectives. We then have, over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, script meetings every 3 to 6 weeks, where I am bringing in more research. Scholars are sharing their research, and we're discussing them and asking each other about them and trying to understand each other's perspectives on also how this topic relates to our world today. Around meeting 7 or 8, I usually have some semblance of a draft that I bring in, and we read that, and people then respond, and then the script continues to evolve over a few more meetings. And I'm usually writing between 300 and 500 pages over the course of the year, so most of what's written doesn't wind up in the show, but it winds up in the show, kind of underneath. And what's really important in these meetings is that everyone in these meetings is asking hard questions, not just about the content of the scenes, but about what the play might mean. In other words, they are not saying this scene works or it doesn't work. Instead, they're asking, how does this scene speak to what the show is going to be about eventually? At the same time as we're doing those script meetings, we are doing 2 to 4 physical ensemble development meetings a month, so that we are actually, while developing the script, also developing a physical vocabulary. And what we're doing is we're moving together. We're learning how each other moves. We're learning each other's rhythms. We're trying to figure out how we actually can work simultaneously in concert. We're also learning techniques that might be in the show. So, for example, in 2019, our show that was a Jewish descent into hell wound up using a lot of shadow work, where a good deal of the cast was in shadow around the audience. And so in our physical developments, our production designer and puppet master, I think she'd love that term, joined us and taught us how to work with shadow puppetry. And we didn't yet know how it would turn out in the piece, but we wound up using it in the eventual production. So we're doing that long trajectory. That takes place again. Physical development meetings as well as script development meetings that are going on monthly. So we probably have, over the course of a year, anywhere from 30 to 40 touch points with each other as a group. We then, about 8 weeks before the show, we transition into a much more focused development process, where we actually go into about 3 to 4 weeks, 8 weeks before the show, of being together 20 to 30 hours a week and trying to figure out this thing and getting things on their feet. And I'm rewriting and bringing in new pages every day, and our dramaturg is attending rehearsals and asking questions. And the choreographer, who is frankly half staging the show because the work is so physical, is saying, does this choreography make sense with this text? And I'm asking, do we need that text anymore because the choreography is speaking in a certain way, or vice versa? So we're spending those first 3-4 weeks kind of trying to make the play, the performance, as full and complete as possible, so that then we can go into what is, in the theater world, a more standard 3 to 4 week rehearsal process, where we're really, at that point, getting ready for production. And so, for those who have never been in a rehearsal process, that's, for us, 20 to 30 hours a week, where we are really staging each of the scenes, experimenting, etc. We then go into what is called Tech Week, which is the period in which really we're putting the show in the space and we're doing all we can to make it as complete as possible and asking those last hard questions, and it's an all-hands-on-deck experience. So before I dive into more about our process, because that's kind of it in a nutshell, and I'll tell you in the coming minutes how we're evolving that process, because even that process I just described is slightly different than it was when we first started. I'd like to invite, if there are any questions about how we work, why we create the way we do, how these principles might apply to your own work, I would love to hear them and answer any of your questions. Could be about the shows themselves, about their content, and our take on the content. It also could be just about your own work, or about, I'd love to know as well as who's with us, where are you from, how do you identify as a playwright, an actor, an audience member, a creator of any sort. I'd love to know. So feel free in the comments to share, and I'll do my best to respond to any of those comments or questions. I'll give it a moment. Don't be shy. No one can see you.
Sharon says hello.
Hi, Sharon.
This is John.
Excellent. Hi, John. Welcome. I will feel free to add your comments and questions, but I'll continue this talk then, and as they arise, I will try and address them. So, one thing I want to share about Theater Dybic's work, and it being for a universal audience from a Jewish perspective, I think is an important part of what we do, which is, Jewish history, which is long and very embedded and intersecting with the great history of the world in a variety of ways, has so many points of entry that I felt that it had something unique to say about our world. And so I decided I wanted to find those hidden pieces, those less known or more challenging pieces of our history that I could bring to a conversation in our world. It's also why Theater Dybic's work, I am most proud when our audience is highly diverse, made up of people from a variety of walks of life. And I'm thrilled that our ensemble of actors, choreographer, dramaturg, composer, teaching artists, that we are a diverse group made up of people, Jewish, not Jewish, from a variety of perspectives and experience. And I think that's what makes our work really strong, is that while we are using Jewish history as an entry point, we are speaking about the world at large, and I am inviting in a variety of voices to that conversation, even to challenge my perspective on it. There have been a number of times in script meetings, for example, where people who come from a different perspective than my own have said, well, in my cultural context, what you're saying actually means this. And I had to shift my thinking and how the piece expresses. Julie, you're looking at me. Anything coming up?
No, Rachel says hello.
Great. Hi, Rachel.
Rebecca's here as well.
Great.
One of our artists.
Welcome, Rebecca. I see Celia's here too. Welcome. So one is, I think that's a really important thing to recognize, and I'll give you a good example of this. That in 2018 we did a show called Lost Tribes, and Lost Tribes utilized the history, mythology, stories around the lost tribes of Israel to eventually look at race, identity, and questions of dominance and subjugation in America. And so the first half of the play was highly sort of Jewish in character. It began with the birth of the Jewish narrative, and then moved into narratives of other religions, and then finally, the second half of the play almost completely left behind an overtly Jewish voice to look at our society at large. And that marriage of Jewish perspective and society at large is, I think, what makes Theater Dybbuk unique. We are saying that in this intersection and difficulty is where some truth lies. Julie.
Dan Lamar has a somewhat different topic.
Great.
Comment. Just talking about fire safety in quarantine. Make sure everybody check your batteries on your fire detectors. Make sure that they are.
Thanks, Dan. Check your batteries on your fire detectors. That's a good call. And actually, Dan, and thank you, I want to say that while that came up in this talk, this is something else we're currently thinking about. How do we create in this time? So I want to bring it there. We have about 5 more minutes. So I just want to share that, we're trying to figure out how to pivot and evolve in this moment, not knowing, frankly, if this is going to be 2 weeks, 2 months, or beyond. And we're doing it in a variety of ways. One is we've currently moved our script meetings to online so that we are having Zoom calls. For those who don't know, Zoom's a great online platform for group meetings where we are actually still engaged in the process of reading script together and talking about it. 2 is we can't currently do our physical development meetings, which is really hard, frankly, because half the vocabulary of our shows is physical. And so we are considering how do we still process together, how do we learn together. I'm starting to think about, there are lots of online resources. We posted the other day from, the Gaga Dance Company and the Batsheva Dance Company in Israel. How do we maybe continue learning physical processes together, even in our own spaces? And also, we have some upcoming in-process events for our current show, Breaking Protocols, which I'll share about in a moment, where we are supposed to be in the public presenting our work in process and hearing people's perspective on the work and their own experience. This is a first for us. We've never done that before. And I recognize those in-person experiences may need to change, and we may need to move to invited online experiences where people get to ask questions and share their own stories in some kind of online conversation. So I'm really processing that, and I want to say about Breaking Protocols that Breaking Protocols, I think, is a great example of the work that Theater Dybbuk is now trying to do. We are utilizing a very controversial, challenging topic, which is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a notorious anti-Semitic fraudulent text that is one of the primary texts often used to make false claims about Jewish power in the world. And we are utilizing that text as a jumping-off point for a theatrical exploration of anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, as well as false narratives around marginalized peoples. And I want to give a shout-out and thank our partners on that, LA Contemporary Exhibitions, the Hive at Leachtag Commons, the Philosophical Research Society, as well as a funding partner, the National Performance Network, and thank them because it's a challenging topic about our world, and we're trying to figure out how we continue the process towards what we still hope is an August premiere, but we just don't know at this point what the next evolution is going to bring. Just to kind of wrap up what I was saying, we are in a unique moment in our society with, as we know, a rise of nationalism. I said unique, actually it's circular in a spiral, it's coming back, and questions of power. And so we are using this topic around the protocols to look at how that rise happens, and as such we're moving into setting the show in a pre-World War II time period where we are asking questions about who we are in the world and how we operate. And we're actually going to likely be using the tools of vaudeville to discover how we express the history of the protocols, because vaudeville, which is both absurd and also highly entertaining, allows us to dive into interesting and difficult topics. Ariel's question about how we fund our work, it's a variety of ways. We are a nonprofit organization, and so like many nonprofits, we piece it together through individual donations, grants. We also have a whole educational wing where we use theatrical techniques for both theatrical and Jewish learning. And that educational wing is partially grant funded and is partially also based on fee for service. And so that is part of our revenue model. We also are really moving into trying to increase our individual donation and donor base, because that really is how a nonprofit theater sustains over a long period of time. It has people who care and can provide a donor base, because frankly the cost of our shows is quite literally 7 to 8 times, if not more, what we earn at the door. We are very proud that we pay people as well as we can at professional wages in order to produce professional work. And that was part of Ariel's question. What was the other part?
It was about the timeline of it.
Yeah. And so the timeline is, because we have this mixed revenue and income model, we are able to plan ahead. So in other words, we try and go on a timeline of hoping that the cost of the show is basically in months before the show itself is happening, but it does mean we are taking a leap of faith. We begin our process knowing that there is fundraising to do as the year goes on. And that's fairly standard for artistic organizations, but it still makes for a challenge. So thank you for the question, and I think it's one of the things in our society we have to continue to think about. How do we, especially at a time like this, continue to support work in large and small ways so that it can be created over this period of time? I think that deep, meaningful work takes time. It takes time to make, it takes time to think about, it takes deep commitment from people, and the realities of rent and living means that deep commitment requires deep financial commitment as well. And we really value that and try and offer that to the people we work with, and we hope that people will offer it back to us. Any other questions coming in?
I think that's good. I think we should wrap it
Great.
up. Facebook's been a little fussy today.
Great. Facebook's being fussy, but this was a good first go. Look forward to being back with you. Feel free to send questions or thoughts, and thank you for your time, and I hope everyone stays safe and healthy as possible at this time, and hope this gave you some just food for thought about your own processes and how you might create together. All right, take care.